UFC 296 just wrapped up, the last UFC card of the year. And man, it was a good card. Don't get me wrong. Like overall, I thought it was a very entertaining card. Main event, a little bit lackluster and weird. Kind of not what we expected, right? You kind of thought that there'd be a little bit more aggression, especially considering all of like the animosity in the press conferences and the build up to this fight and Colby saying those things about Leon's dad. You just kind of thought there'd be a little bit more action in the fight, but Leon put on a solid performance and retained the title, right? Very clear victory for him. And the rest of the card was, like I said, entertaining, but there are things happening outside of the cage and in the build-up to this fight that are almost like setting the stage for 2024. And that weirdly, and again, incredible performance. There were some incredible performances on this card, but it just felt like that event and the events leading up to it were like setting the stage for 2024 and the things to come, right? Especially like Shavkat victory over Wonderboy, for example, that kind of seemed inevitable. Like nothing against Wonderboy, and it's not that Wonderboy didn't have a chance. Wonderboy has a very tough style to deal with, right? He's very long and lengthy for the division. He has great striking. He controls the distance very well, and he's a hard guy to take down, and he's a hard guy to control on the ground. But it felt like, again, Shavkat goes in there, gets a finish, now has 18 finishes, by the way. In 18 fights, he's 18-0 and has 18 finishes. And he goes in and chokes out Wonderboy Thompson, a guy who is difficult to choke out. I mean, remember that guillotine Tyron Woodley had Wonderboy in? And then even the rear naked choke that Shavkat locked up towards the end of or right before he got the actual rear naked, right? Wonderboy's a tough guy to get out of there, and Shavkat did it, though. And part of the reason that I want to do a breakdown on this, like on the grappling exchanges in this one, is just because Shavkat is so good at chaining things together, right? I really think that in the last, especially this Russian era, but there has really been a dramatic jump in skill in the wrestling department in the UFC, which is very interesting. But like MMA wrestling is a lot different than just like Olympic style wrestling or freestyle wrestling or even like Greco-Roman, any of those like styles of wrestling, right? It's very different because of the threat of the punches and the kicks of it, knees coming up the middle. You have to approach things differently. But man, I feel like when I'm watching Shavkat, I'm watching a representation, and when I'm watching Khamzat, I'm watching a representation of this new wave of fighters who are really well-rounded on the feet, and their grappling game is just next level, especially when they get the top position. They just wear on you. They're always a step ahead of you. And when he went for the takedown against Wonderboy, just chaining things together, right? Went for the high single. He's hoisting that leg up. Wonderboy's trying to jump on one foot to avoid being tripped. And instead of trying the trip, which would be maybe a fruitless effort, Shavkat just swims over the top, right? Throws an overtie and runs Wonderboy back against the cage. Immediately shelves the fucking legs and completes the takedown and just controls him and beats him up from there. And man, it's when you watch that performance, I know Wonderboy's 40, but it put Shavkat on the map. And again, you're setting things up for his 2024 run, right? And, you know, Leon Edwards versus Colby Covington is a big fight. Like, it was a good fight. Colby Covington's one of the best. But it felt like last night, to me, in a weird way, it was more about what's coming at 170 especially. And then, obviously, I'm jumping around a little bit here. We'll get back to the other main card fights, obviously. But obviously, also, Sean Strickland versus Dricus Du Plessis at 185 pounds, right? It felt that, and the fight breaking out in the crowd the way it did between Dricus and Sean, again, setting the stage for 2024, right? Like, that's what last night felt like it was about to me. And things kind of played out how I think you almost expected them to, but a lot to look forward to. I'm excited for it. Speaking of Sean Strickland and Dricus, we got to talk about this. Crazy. Absolutely nuts. But I was thinking about this earlier, and remember when Khabib jumped the cage after his fight against Conor, tried to attack like Dylan Dennis in Conor's corner, there was a brawl in the octagon. I was very put off by that at the time because I guess I just didn't expect that from Khabib. It felt out of character for him. So when you saw it, you were like, man, I don't know, I didn't think he would do that, blah, blah, blah. But if anything, Khabib, reflecting on it now, Khabib was probably more justified in that moment, right? Because he just beat up Conor. He was in a fight. His adrenaline is spiked, right? Where Sean Strickland is just sitting in the crowd watching the fights. He shouldn't exactly be hopping, and regardless, fucking hilarious. He asks Gilbert Burns' kids to move aside and then immediately hops over the chair and starts pounding on Dricus. Like, that is a lot different than Khabib being fired up in the moment after just strangling a guy that was talking all this shit in all these press conferences and trying to get into your head, and you're in a heightened state of emotion. You just beat this man in front of all of these people, and you're representing your country against his, and that's a big moment. So for Khabib to be in that state and attack Danis or the court, whatever, actually seems more forgivable than what Strickland did last night. But the interesting part about it is, because you know Strickland's background and you know who he is, I wasn't put off by it. It didn't bother me that he did that, because it's Sean Strickland. And say what you want, man, but he has done a lot to make this upcoming fight with Dricus Du Plessis very intriguing. All the stuff that was said at the press conferences, you don't have to agree with it. I don't agree with the stuff that he's saying, but he's an interesting character, because when he says these things, he will layer in certain points where you go, he kind of has a point there. Like, for example, him and O'Malley get into it at the press conference, going back and forth or whatever, saying things to each other. And O'Malley starts attacking Strickland about sexual abuse that he made from his father or whatever, right? Like, he makes a comment regarding that. And Strickland made the point that, like, with him and Dricus, but like, even when Sean Strickland is attacking Dricus and calling him, I mean, he dropped the hard F-bomb on Dricus, right? Like, he dropped bad F-bomb. Dropped that. Like, even if he said that, and even if what he's saying is not right, he's attacking you for the things that you're doing that are put out to the media and the things that you are choosing, right? That's the point that he made in his tweet when he was like, I'm attacking these guys as men, and for them to attack me as a victim of something that I cannot help. Like, I cannot help that happened. That's wrong. And you kind of look at it and go, damn, I mean, Sean Strickland says some outlandish shit, but that's a very good point. Like, when O'Malley is attacking Sean Strickland for being a sexual abuse victim versus Strickland attacking O'Malley for letting his wife sleep with other people or whatever, that's a choice that O'Malley made and put on a podcast. So he's saying, I'm attacking you for things that are being put out about you based on decisions that you're making right now. And wrong. Not right that he said this at all to Dricus, but the fact that he called him what he did and said what he did about him, and he was like, go fuck your trainer. He's talking about the fact that he was grabbing his cup and like kid, whatever. He's attacking these things that he's seeing, not something that Dricus couldn't help, right? Like, and same thing, I think that's why Strickland stood up for Leon. And again, I thought Strickland was he's wrong in a lot of things, but I thought he was right in this point. Like, Colby Covington talking about the death of Leon's dad was the same concept. Like, that's something that Leon cannot help, right? That's not based on decisions that he's making as a grown adult. Like, he cannot help that his father was murdered. Leon is not accountable at all for the actions of his father. So those are true low blows in my mind. Like, they say there's not a line, and you can say that, like, I just also feel like comments like that are not needle movers. Like, I feel like just because Colby said that, I don't think as many people buy the pay. It's not like so many people are like, I'm buying the pay-per-view now. Did you hear what Colby said? I'm buying the pay-per-view. Like, no, I don't think so. Not in my opinion. It might do a little bit, but I don't think it's really moving the needle that much that things like that need to be said. And, it's like, I saw an argument between Chris Weidman and DC that was like it was like a minute video or something, a clip where they were arguing about if Conor crossed the line when he fought Khabib. And again, in my mind, yes, but I'm just looking at it from an ethical perspective. But like, I feel like when you're Conor McGregor, you can talk all the shit you want without going there, and the fight is still going to do just as well. I don't think necessarily that adding those comments in does. Maybe it does. Maybe I'm completely wrong. I'd love to see like real hard data on it, but I just don't think that it moves the needle like people thinks it does. So when you do that, if anything, you're just giving the other person incentive to like be angry. And okay, again, back to, we're jumping around a lot here, but let's go on to Leon and Colby fighting last night. And Leon kind of put on I don't think Leon put on a performance. I think Colby put on a weird performance. And I think that what happened, this was my analysis of it when I was watching it, and I could be wrong. Again, I don't want to pretend to like live in these fighters' heads when I'm guessing these things, right? But it felt like to me, as soon as Leon came out, Colby was confused. I felt like Colby was very confused by all, because when Leon is fighting you, man, he's switching his stances. He's going high, low, he's jabbing in. Like he's constantly feinting, constantly giving you looks. And there is no doubt on who is faster, who has the better head movement, who is the smoother striker just in terms of fluidity on the blows, who has the better footwork. Like there's no doubt in the world that it's Leon. And I think that when Colby had to stand in front of that, the chances that he were willing to take just went down. How are you can't apply pressure on someone like Leon unless you're boxing and throwing your hands. Because Leon is he's a good counter striker, but he's just better than Colby in those exchanges, and he's going to find openings in Colby's game. So I think Colby had no way to put his foot on the gas, because if he just started entering into range, Leon was just going to dot him up, and he had to box his way there. And I think that Colby felt like if he started boxing his way in, he was going to leave too many openings and get tagged and knocked the fuck out. I really feel that that's what happened. I think it froze Colby up a little bit. And as the rounds wore on, Colby started finding success with like that overhand left, landing some takedowns of his own, obviously won the 5th round. I think that as the fight wore on, that danger from Leon started to fade a little bit, and that's why you started to see Colby have a little bit more success, right? Also, just the fact that Leon was willing to take these interesting risks, right? Like taking Colby Covington down. I think he was trying to prove a point with stuff like that. But I was listening to Joe Rogan after the podcast, or after the fights, and I agreed with what he said. Like, Colby ended the fight on top, and Leon dominated 4 rounds, pretty much, right? Like, the impression that it left you with was very odd. Like, if you're Leon Edwards, you do want to be dominating at the end. And he almost got the triangle, almost got the armbar, but he almost had a ninja choke at one point in the fight, and Colby, like, gator rolled out of that. It's like, at some point, I understand the ego. You want to beat this guy up and at his own game, but knock him the fuck out. And I felt like there were moments in the 3rd round where it's like, okay, we've established that Colby, after 2 rounds, isn't really presenting any danger. He's not the kind of guy that necessarily has one punch knockout power. Don't get me wrong, though. Colby has more power on his punches than people give him credit for. He definitely, like, when he hits people, I think they kind of get surprised by it a little bit, and maybe that plays in. But Colby can hit, but he doesn't have that one punch knockout power that really scares you. And I felt like if Leon started to open up and take a little bit more risk on the feet, that he would have been able to put Colby in a defensive, like, shell, and things would start to become predictable from him, and he could get him out of there. I really felt like if he opened up and just let his hands fly a little bit more, that he could win that fight. But you got to think, man, in hindsight too, and I thought this going into it potentially, this was a favorable matchup for Leon. Again, Colby has to box his way into range, and he's just not as good of a striker. And he just doesn't have that power that really threatens Leon. You know, and Leon has some underrated jiu-jitsu. He can get out of these bad positions, and he's gone. He beat Kamaru Usman. I mean, he essentially went the distance with Kamaru twice, right? I mean, I know he knocked him out in their 2nd fight, but he's essentially gone 5 rounds with the man twice. So he knows what that feels like. He knows what that kind of pressure feels like. And Kamaru is somebody who has a really good jab. And Colby's not somebody, he throws a lot of volume in combinations. Not that he doesn't have a good jab, but like Kamaru's jab is stiff, right? They're just different styles. And I feel like Kamaru just had a more like durable, willing to walk through things type of style than Colby. And I kind of played out last night. The interesting thing is, what do you do next? Who does Leon Edwards fight next? And I think it's got to be Belal. I think that Belal, he went in there and he beat Wonderboy, back in 2020 or 2021? Luque, Sean Brady. I mean, who did he most recently just beat? But I don't think that you can deny the man any longer. And I know that this is like a business, but This fight is falling at a really good time, interestingly, because I think that what they should do, this is not a headlining pay-per-view fight. It's just not. I don't think enough people are interested in watching Belal fight. And to be honest with you, like some of Leon's fights are a little bit boring. You know what I mean? Like even the last Usman fight, it was a good fight, but it wasn't, it's not like my point is just that I like both guys a lot. They're very talented, and I'm more of a purist as opposed to business. Right? Like I really do think you give it to the most deserving person, but this is not going to headline. It's not going to do well if it headlines a pay-per-view. But if you throw this fight on UFC 300, there's going to be enough supporting cast on that card to hold this up. And it does add a really good fight to a monumental card. And I think that's what they should do. I think they should throw Belal and Leon on UFC 300 so that it doesn't have to try to sell itself. And then, however that plays out, you know that you've got guys like Shavkat Rakhmonov waiting in the wings. I think he should have one more fight. I mean, don't get me wrong. We talked about it earlier. Wonderboy is a very tough challenge for anybody. But he's also 40 years old. And I know Wonderboy said going into the fight that doesn't matter, but statistically, if you look at things throughout MMA history, it does matter. And I'd like to see Shavkat get one more fight. You know what I mean? Against a top 5 guy, top 3, whatever, and then throw him into the title shot. But I think Belal has done enough to earn. Oh, Gilbert Burns obviously is the guy that he most recently beat. But he's done enough to earn the title shot in my opinion, and he should be next. And 300 feels like a really good spot for that fight. Let's see. Let's go back through some of these other fights now. Paddy Pimblett and Tony Ferguson. Man, I thought there was a moment in the third round where Ferguson was going to pull it off. But do you know what I was thinking about watching this fight? Pimblett is a big guy. And it really felt like that was a big difference maker in the fight last night to me. There was more power on Paddy's punches. He's filled out a lot more for that weight class. He's bigger than Tony. And I think that mattered a lot. But Paddy got tired in the third round. And real tired. And DC made a great analysis on this, and it's true about Tony if you look at him throughout his career. When he gets taken down, he is too accepting of being on his back because he has so much confidence in his guard. But if he could have gotten his feet to the hips instead of going for triangles and stuff in that third round and somehow forced a scramble and worked his way back to the feet, he might have been able to get Paddy out of there. I mean, Paddy was dead tired and then found his way to a takedown and then controlled Tony throughout the round, which was also, I will say, Paddy Pimblett impressed me in that I thought that Tony he did slice him up with elbows and stuff. Tony's always active from the bottom. But I was worried that Paddy might not attack him with the ground and pound as much. And he did a really good job of that through the first 2 rounds. When he got the takedown, I thought he mixed in ground and pound really well. And I thought he looked better on the feet too. Now granted, Tony Ferguson's lost 6 fights in a row. He's been beat up, and there were moments in that fight where Pimblett was hitting him, and it reminded me of the Gaethje fight, the way he would back off and back across the cage and step way, way, way out of range, almost retreat. That's how we started looking toward the end of the Gaethje fight. And man, Tony just hasn't looked the same since then. He's had moments. He knocked down Bobby Green, hurt Michael Chandler, but he just hasn't been able to seal the deal. And, last night again, this fight, I kind of think went how expected. Paddy Pimblett was able to kind of bully Tony Ferguson around in there. There was a glimmer of hope at the end, but Paddy just shut the shit off, got the takedown, controlled him, and again, Tony content to kind of hang out from the bottom and not making... He made more of an effort to submit Paddy than he did to get up, and I think it cost him. But I think Tony's at that point, man, where is a title shot realistic? Or are you going to work your way back up through the ranks and beat, the killers in the top of that division? I don't think so. So it'll be interesting to see what Tony does next. All right. Huge knockout. One of the worst I've ever seen. Josh Emmett versus Bryce Mitchell. It was... You knew that Emmett had power and big power. We've seen him knock guys out cold. But Jesus Christ, man. I mean, it was I think Bryce maybe like, I don't know if he was going for a level change or to throw a strike of his own, but when Josh Emmett stepped into it, he caught him perfect. Like Mitchell was coming forward into the blow. Emmett was stepping into it. Mitchell was completely exposed and overextended, and he just fucking sent him into the next dimension, man. I mean, convulsing, scary knockout. Very scary knockout. I was glad to see that Bryce Mitchell was okay after that, but whew, man, you don't see a lot of knockouts like that from punching either. And Josh Emmett just fucking uncorked one and laid him out cold. So I don't know, man. Bryce Mitchell is one of those guys who has really, really good grappling, but he's got to work on. And I know people are like, he dropped Barboza, and I'm like, yeah, he did, and that's impressive. But he's got to. That knockout was so clean. I don't like. He's got to shore some of that stuff up. You know what I mean? Like, just being realistic. Like, the reality of fighting at the top level and winning a championship at 145 pounds is that you have to be able to deal with that problem. You know what I mean? And guys like Yair Rodriguez dealt with that problem. In order to get to that next level, and it's not that anybody can't get caught. It just feels like if Bryce Mitchell and Josh Emmett fought over and over again, that might happen repeatedly. Like Emmett might find home for that big hand, like that big strike and land that, like more often than not, is the impression that it left me with, at least. So, man, I don't know. I think that Mitchell is very talented, but at some point, if he wants to cross I know he's committed to Arkansas, but I think that if he wants to get to that next level, he might have to branch out and get some more high-level people around him in the striking department. It's the reality of the sport, man. I do think that like your loyalty can hold you back. I talked in my podcast with Josh Frem that I did recently. If you guys haven't seen that, go check it out. But we talked about that same thing, especially like back in Pittsburgh, man. Like loyalty is great, but you have got to find a way if you want to win a UFC championship to get on the right path, and that doesn't always involve staying at your home gym. I love the faith that he has in them, but I don't know if it'll win you a title. Not at the level fighters are at today. Just my opinion. All right, prelims real quick. We'll run through these. Alonzo Metafield, unanimous decision over Dustin Jacoby. This was an interesting fight, man, because it felt like Jacoby tactically was better, but Metafield kept hurting him in big moments. And he hurt him in the third round. He hurt him in the second round. And Jacoby would hurt Metafield too. Like he'd wobble him a little bit, but it felt like Metafield hurt him worse. Aldana and Carol Rosa put on not just fight of the night, but one of the fights of the year. I mean, what a fucking war. And Aldana has some work to do with defending the leg kicks, but her boxing is some of the best in the world. I mean, her boxing is super crisp. She puts pressure on her opponents, and she did the same thing with Carol Rosa last night. I mean, what a warrior Rosa is too. I mean, she was fighting through. You got to think about how hard it would be to fight through just constantly, boom, 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 repeatedly. This girl, a little bit longer and rangier than you, just pop, 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 just constantly popping you with strikes, hitting you with uppercuts, just constantly bringing the heat, attacking the body. I mean, for Rosa to walk through some of the stuff she did and keep attacking herself, what a fight. I mean, what a fight. One of the best fights. Like I said, my opinion of the year. Cody Garbrandt knocked out Brian Kelleher, got back on track, right? Like, who's Cody's last fight against? Cody's had such an interesting career, man, because he had this... He got accelerated into the title shot, right? Like, because he was knocking everybody out, and then he gets this matchup against Dominic Cruz, beats him, and then he gets knocked out twice by TJ Dillashaw, and, you know, never quite makes it back to that championship level again, despite a brilliant performance against a Sun Sao, right? I don't know, man. Moves down to flyweight and just... Oh, he beat Trevin Jones. That's right. Kai Kara France before that. He lost. And then Rob Font before that. I forgot about the Trevin Jones fight. But yeah, he's rattled off 2 in a row now. So back on track isn't exactly the right word, but he extends his win streak. And keeps things moving there. But I'm going to wrap this one up, guys. I don't know if you guys can tell my voice is a little bit off. I haven't been feeling too good. So I'm going to wrap this one a little bit early. But just wanted to talk about, again, some of the highlights from the card, some of the Like again, last night to me felt like we're setting the stage for 2024. And there's some big fights coming up in 2024. Obviously, the first pay-per-view with Strickland-Du Plessis. That's a big one. And then you got UFC 300 to look for. UFC 299, by the way, is shaping up to be a banger of a card. I think me and my buddies are going to try to go to this one. Oh, some ad on MMA Junkie. My bad. But we're going to try to go to, I think, UFC 299 in Miami. Obviously, O'Malley versus Vera. Ian Gary versus Jeff Neal just got announced. Burns versus Jack Della Maddalena. Song Yadong versus Piotr Jan. Holland versus MVP. MVP just got signed by the UFC, matched up against Kevin Holland. That's huge news. How did I forget to talk about all this shit, right? All the UFC 299 announcements. But man, Rafael dos Anjos versus Mateusz Gamrot. Muniz versus Phillips. I mean, damn, this card is stacked. Macy Barber versus Caitlin Chikagian. Stacked card. The Ian Gary situation is weird, right? Everything that happened with him getting the flu. Now he's got a new opponent. He's not even fighting Vicente Luque anymore. He's fighting Jeff Neal. So, I don't know. That's actually a more interesting matchup to me. Jeff Neal's dangerous, man. He hits hard, and he's mixed it up with some of the best guys in the world now. So it's going to be interesting to see a fight between him and one of the rising stars at 170. And, man, I don't know. Whether it was the timing of, the sickness or whether it was some weird tactic for Gary to get out of the fight because of all of the things happening around him and his wife, obviously, and his family, I don't know. But I actually think we're getting a better fight in Ian Gary versus Jeff Neal. I think this Luque versus Gary would have been a good fight, but I'm a little bit more interested in seeing Neal versus Gary. I think Neal's really going to be a guy who is confident in his striking, and he'll let things fly in this fight against Gary. And Gary obviously likes to stand, right? He's a great striker. So I think you might get a more entertaining matchup in this one. But we'll see. We'll see. UFC 299 shaping up to be a great card. But I'm going to hop off here, guys. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. Much appreciated. I'm going to try to get in a rhythm of doing this a little bit. Like, I got to get on the consistency on this, man. But we're actually heading out next week on Christmas Day to Australia for 2 weeks, going to Sydney and Melbourne, and then over to New Zealand. We're taking like a family vacation over there. So probably be gone for a few weeks, so I don't know if I'll put out content. But I am, while I'm in Melbourne, going to try to stop in at Absolute MMA and get a jiu-jitsu class in with Lachlan Giles if I can. I was looking at their schedule, and it looks like January 3rd. He teaches classes there. So obviously, Lachlan Giles, well, not obviously, if you guys follow BJJ, obviously, but Lachlan Giles is a huge name in the jiu-jitsu world. So yeah, I'm thinking like on the 3rd, if I can swing it, it's like 8 minutes away from our hotel by car. So if I get an Uber, I'm going to try to hit that class up. I'm going to reach out to them this week and see if I can drop in. But yeah, that's on the horizon. So again, New Year's resolution is to be more on top of this and more consistent. But I say that all the time. I just got to do it, right? Anyway, done rambling. Thank you as always for tuning in. Hit the subscribe button, thumbs up, all that good shit, and I will catch you guys later. Have a good one. Bye-bye.